Next topic, you background check your employer. No, no, you're already working there
Mhm.
and you find something out about a coworker, a boss, etc. What do you do?
I'm sure we have two very different answers to this question.
Sue everyone. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Um, so first is, how do you find out something, right? It could either be that you witnessed something, them doing something, maybe they did something kind of weird to you or off-putting, and so you start researching them yourself. Maybe you find their like social media profiles. There's, maybe you see them like your own boss or coworker on one of those, are we dating the same guy? Facebook groups. We never know what's going to happen nowadays, right? How we could come across, negative information about someone. And I think it's first, I would say it's valid to trust your gut instincts. Like if you're seeing, like, this person seems, they're making you uncomfortable, you've witnessed something, you've seen something, definitely you can do your research on them. All of the stuff that I just said, you can do it once you're in the role as well. And then I'd probably say talk to a lawyer before you probably go to HR or say anything about it because you don't want to jeopardize your own role as well. And you could probably be seen as some cases a whistleblower for telling on this person. Like there's so many things that could happen that I think just knowing your rights and how it could play out is maybe an important first step. But what do you think?
Definitely be proactive. I mean, I worked at a firm early in my career where I accidentally happened upon a supervisor and one of my peers engaged in an act in a parked car, very wisely parked in the parking lot of our workplace. And I think they saw me see them, and then I like took that shit to my grave. But one, my peer, who was and is a lovely person and a very good attorney, would like reassign cases she didn't want to work on to me because she had a little bit of pull with the supervisor for obvious reasons. And two, they were later outed completely not by me, by a receptionist who was like not having it because they were not discreet at all. And they like blamed me. Like they
Mm,
came like, how could you tell? And I was like, I saw you years ago. And like I left. Like I'm not here anymore. I didn't tell anyone anything.
mm,
And they were like, we hate you now. And like we're all past that now. But like I guess if I had been more proactive somehow, maybe I could have like one dodged the bullet of like getting assigned a bunch of cases I didn't want to work on because she didn't want to work on them. And then two, it's not like keeping quiet didn't protect me.
mm.
So, it can be complex, I guess, is what I'm saying. Um,
Well, there are often like, especially bigger companies have those anonymous. Okay, we'll put those
yeah,
in large
there
quotation.
is no anonymous interaction with your employer ever at any time. And if you have your employer's app on your phone, that is not nothing on your phone is anonymous. Sorry, you were
No,
saying.
it's a great point, right? These reporting systems that we're definitely seeing pop up more, and the things I've heard are, questionable at best. Of, it's the employer paying for it, so they don't really want you to show them their rights in the system, right?
Exactly.
But obviously, a safe workplace is a law in most cases, right? A work, yeah, yeah. But so I think it's that personal evaluation of what is the next best step, and it's always going to be a personal choice. And what was the harm witnessed? Do you think that they're using, I've seen a lot of doctor cases this year, medical essay cases, and these doctors are often committing these horrific acts for decades with, hundreds of victims, and you have to sit there and say, okay, someone probably knew. Why
Yeah.
didn't they say anything, and what happens? And so it's incredibly complex, but um yeah, I think it's just using your best judgment in those scenarios, and what's the level of harm happening, you know. And first and foremost, I think the biggest thing is protecting yourself, right? We always want to help other people. I think that's, I mean, I'm my own victim of that, where I've helped my other people much more than I've helped myself in many ways. And it's never the ultimately the right thing to do. So I'd say protect yourself first and foremost.
It's like on the airline when they're like, make sure you put your air mask on, your oxygen mask on before you help the person next to you. But nobody ever does that. Everybody turns immediately to their child or their friend. They're like, let me help you, you know? And I guess that speaks well for humanity. You wouldn't think that is actually how humanity is, but in that moment, it seems like many of us are in fact going to help the other person more than ourselves. Just
it,
surprising.
it it's the old adage of, also like HR works for the company, they don't work for you, right? And so you
Yes.
have to protect yourself, you have to be on the lookout. And ultimately, if you do report even immense harm, you could still be retaliated against, fired for that, because they're going to protect their interests, and they could see you as detrimental to those interests, even if you
The
are trying to help.
only time HR will help you is when in helping you, they help the company. There's certainly bleeding heart HR reps. There's some amazing HR reps. I'm not impugning the entire industry, but the job is protect the employer, right? It's what the job is.
You know what just came up in my head, and I don't think I've ever connected these dots before you said that, which is, trust and safety also works for the company if all of these online
100%.
apps, right? And they're there to
Yep.
protect the interest of the company, right? They can say, oh, we care about user safety and protecting them. And, in case of marketplaces, we also care about, the drivers or delivery people, whatever it may be. But ultimately, I've seen that trust and safety, they care about the company's interest, and they'll be fired or leave the industry, as I've seen many times, if they can't handle it.
We can keep going. So, like employee assistance will absolutely, you go to them, you're like, I'm having a mental health issue. That will often be reported back. Like, oh, so and so's got a lot of anxiety, feeling some aggression, having, lost his sleep. And then people start looking at you like you're unwell, you're dangerous, what's going on out of nowhere. But let's not leave it behind. I mean, arbitrators, and listen, I am an arbitrator. I'm an employment arbitrator. I arbitrate for AAA. I think AAA is amazing. But I will tell you, if you're arbitrating with New York City, those arbitrators keep track of how often they find against New York City. They
Mm.
find for the employee because if you find against New York City too often, you just fall allegedly, you fall off the arbitrator plan. You just don't get any more jobs. And it's a very lucrative gig. You can get tens upon tens of thousands of dollars to arbitrate a case for New York City. You work 3, 4 days, pocket 30, 40 grand. What a gig, right? But you find against the city 6 times out of 10. Oh, I don't know if you're going to make it next year, you know? And that's tough. Mental health professionals brought in to do independent reviews. A lot, we see this in teachers all the time. Are you fit? Police officers, firefighters, are you fit? They they say you're fit too often, right? They have somebody who will say you're fit, and they have somebody who will say you're not fit. And if either of those people are not doing their job, they find someone else. That's how it goes. And I'm not saying these people are engaging in the fraudulent practice of medicine, but I might if I had a case, you know?
There was a Broadway show just I think it's closed now, called Job, and it was about a trust and safety professional who has a mental freak out, very public at her workplace. They put her on leave, and she has to get interviewed by this psychologist. A two-person show, her and the psychiatrist psychologist interviewing her, that was hired by the workplace. And I don't want to give away the whole premise of the show, but she finds out,
Spoiler alert.
yeah, spoiler alert, straight up. But she finds out that, or in her head, she believes that he is a bad actor that she's done a lot of research for in her work. And at the end, it's like he's willing to give her the job back if she doesn't say anything about what she believes, right? So you're just seeing that constant push and pull around these types of roles, right?
Yeah. And that's the classic Sophie's Choice. So she found herself in the plaintiff's quandary, right? Which is, hey, this guy, we found that he's done it before. He'll do it again. He wants to give me the job and $500,000, but he'll do it again. And that's I've been in so many rooms with people who just sit there like, well, my kid does really need this surgery, and it's like, it's not your job to keep everyone safe. It is, in fact, someone else's job, but it's not your job. And then but then you watch people wrestle with that moral question, and I've seen them be like, I know who's gonna be next. Like he's grooming her, and I don't have any answers for anyone facing that question. I never have. I'm just like, it's not, all I ever say is not your job. You don't have to be a hero. I can see why you might want to, and then they just think, you know, it's hard.
Yeah, and in the case of, essay work or domestic violence work, you often, it takes a long time for people to feel safe to report.
Yeah.
And that can be for a variety of reasons, right? Like literally fearing that the person is going to retaliate, not feeling like they're going to be believed, et cetera, long list. But the thing that I've heard most often in my career is when people do decide that they want to report, it's not because they want to punish the person, see them go to jail, or see them face criminal charges. It's because they want to protect the next person. They want it to
Yeah.
stop. They know that they know that this person is continuing this behavior. They have beliefs that the behavior is continuing. And a lot of my work, especially over the last year, where I've been working with this org called Helping Survivors, that helps people understand their legal rights and options after experiencing, sexual assault, abuse, harassment, etc. And that's the number one trend that I saw in folks reaching out. And I would say, here's how you report to law enforcement, but also you can't press charges against someone. That's not how it works. It's the state versus the accused, and they have to, decide. And so don't put all of this weight, this burden that, I didn't do anything. There's the survivor's guilt that I didn't do anything. I knew that harm was continuing to happen. And and I've seen it in my own life and had to say, to protect myself, to protect my loved ones, I have to go the gray rock method, which is not responding, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a different context completely in a bit. And you can't warn the other woman. You can't, because you don't know how they'll react. They could, tell the perpetrator that you've told them. They could be in so deep already that, they retaliate against you. There's so many, unknowns in it. And that's why I say you just have to keep yourself safe and protect yourself and put on your own mask, as you said.
And to your point, it's not just that they might be in deep, but like if they've already experienced trauma plays out in so many counterintuitive ways. Often you'll see, and I'm not a mental health professional, certainly, but often you'll see for the first 6 months after just this desperate, rabid desire to protect the bad actor who did a
Mm,
horrible thing. And it's dangerous. Like they'll go after other people trying to combat the bad actor, trying to harm those people. Not like I mean, maybe physically, but also like in the job site, um, the workplace, I guess is the word I'm looking for. But and then, a year later, they're bringing their own case. But in the meantime, they like discredited the original person fighting the bad actor and like did everything they could to like ruin that person's case and that person's efforts. And it's just like, you can't be mad at them because that's kind of how the human brain works. But wow, like, and now they have their own case and they're calling up like, hey, remember your
mhm.
client that I like screwed over? Yeah. Can we get the transcripts from that case? And it's like, are you for real? Like, but also, I guess I have to understand basic psychology. Like, I I don't know. I don't know.
No, it definitely happens of that. One, I think the monkey brain, the animal brain, instinct is survival, right? Is survival. And survival, I mean, I often say is not pretty. It's, surviving. And your brain will do things to deflect, to say that didn't happen, to rationalize behaviors, all of these just trauma responses that you are kind of subconscious and can't control. And then it's not until you're removed or the harm happens to you, or you can process it, right? And um, just general essay work, um, you often see that incident happens, or domestic violence, it happens, and then they stay with the person and they rationalize it and they, make excuses for the behavior. And then after they leave, eventually, um, they start to relabel those experiences in their head or shift things. And they're like, or often people are essayed and they continue on with that person because they're like, well, I have to make it make sense in my head. There's so many ways that the human brain works around all of these things that, I mean, I definitely think we should be doing more research on. And so that way, whether it's employment law or how employers respond or how law enforcement responds or whatever, can kind of understand the trauma response essentially.
I couldn't agree more. I love that we're off topic, and I don't think we have to get through everything, but I will say one of the big issues is so trauma responses are not well researched, to your point, and then you're litigating them, and it's like somebody like was sexually assaulted, and then like over the next couple of days, she sends a message like, "Ah, that night was great, thank you so much," blah blah blah, and it's like, well, hold on. On the surface, that looks terrible because like that's probably not you would say if you felt you've been sexually assaulted, but because of trauma, it is kind of what you say, to your point. But those trauma responses are not well documented in the DSM-5, which makes them very difficult to litigate. And when you have dueling experts, your expert is hamstrung by the fact that the other expert's going to say, "Yeah, but that's not in the book." Right? And it's just like things like Stockholm syndrome or Stockholm impulses, which are a little more commonplace, they're not in the DSM-5. And it's just like we know what happens. We we know it, but no one did no one got the grant. No one
Mm,
did the research. Like I don't understand. And also psychology is one of the industries most impacted by the research citation issues going on in academia right now. So like a lot of the research is being invalidated. So I don't know when they're going to backfill with real research this time. Like it's very upsetting.
no, and it's, whether it's employment litigation or, a law enforcement officer, it's really the district attorney, right? Deciding whether they can press charges or not. And there is, and so many people don't know, there is like this, beyond a reasonable doubt burden that they have to think that before they can even bring charges, that they can convince a jury. And oftentimes, I mean, sometimes in employment case, there probably is a bit more evidence, right? Like cameras and text messages and things like that, witnesses. But in SA, DV, things that happen in the home, that's he said, she said, right? And they're going to do everything they can to protect themselves. And so it's an unfortunate reality. And so whether people choose to engage in these systems is theirs. Although, I'm very big on using employment lawyers is how I will how I will put it is I think often people don't think that, oh, I don't have a case. Oh, it wasn't that bad, especially men we see, right? And so, or young women, Ari and I've talked about this many times of where young women who are conventionally attractive in workplaces are almost always sexually harassed. It's like you're
Yep.
signing up for it in a way. And um and not that you're not seeking out that behavior, but you're just put in a shark tank, right? And you're a little fish. And ensuring that especially young women have an understanding of their rights and what they can do, and not feeling scared, I think is a big thing that we're seeing with this upcoming generation with, videos like this, content like this, where we can just help people know better, know more.
I'm low key fascinated by Gen Z
Me too.
because what?
Me too.
The the employment attorney content on TikTok is questionable at times, but they really like it and they seem to reference it like in the real world. Like as like a almost like a talisman, like some kind of like knight in a storybook, like screaming a psalm at a demon or something. I don't know. It's like you can't do this because of Title VII, and it's just like well, that's not how that works. But well done. Like that's amazing. I don't like. I wish it was how it worked. By the power of Title VII, I compelled. But anyways, it's very strange because millennials do not do that at all. Like millennials, in my experience, are more likely to sue, but silently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And boomers were quiet for so long, but now are like the most ready because some of those are first wave women of the workplace who dealt with so much for so long. They're finally like, oh, I retire in 2 years. I am gonna fuck this guy up, just like because they got nothing to lose. At this point they can turn around and fight, and they can. Um, and it's interesting to watch the generations because there are
Mm.
some differences.
Oh, I think there's a lot of differences. I mean, older generations, one, they would stay at jobs much longer, some their whole career at the same job. So they're
Yeah.
very loyal to the employer despite faults. And I think it's interesting what you said about millennials, which is the first generation, if you kind of think about it, that, you know, um, women have, I mean, they're often like underpaid, we know that, but similar jobs to men, and they can hold those same power positions. So they don't need to get married,
Right.
to literally live and feed themselves. We're seeing much more job hopping, obviously, in this generation. And I think you're right about the kind of silence of the millennials, that they are more willing to sue and understand their rights, but are not going to be posting about it on TikTok, and that's the younger generation who I think are so used to. I mean, everyone says they hate cancel culture, but they are kind of doing that, right? It's being very public about canceling an employer, or they did this, or the school did this, whatever it is. That generation is much, much louder.
Yeah, in a meaningful fashion, I think.
Yeah, I think sometimes.